My name is Matt Kelly and I love a great experience. In 2011, I broke the world record for the longest high five, which somehow led me to crowd surfing in Austin, Texas. I've written a best-selling book, worked for a billionaire, and hosted an iTunes #1 podcast. And now, I'm a director at JMD, a Brisbane-based creative and marketing agency. I believe that if you're going to do anything in life, do it because it'll be a great story and a great experience, which is exactly what this show is all about. Welcome to the Great XP Podcast. Hello and welcome again to another episode of the Great XP Podcast, where we talk to business leaders and marketers and explore all the experiences that make up their day-to-day life, because we believe that good or bad, something can be learned from every single experience we have. And with that comes today's guest, a guest that I know very well and a guest that has a phenomenal story. Today we've got Hans Pearson here. Hans is the CEO and founder of the StoreLocal group, one of the probably fastest growing and more interesting stories in the self-storage space. With over 35 facilities, this is a business that I think if you, Hans, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but if you said our business is an outlaw, someone might go, really? But I think this is actually a pretty good story. So first of all, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Oh, my absolute pleasure, Matt, and great opportunity to support the podcast and the great team at JMD.
Oh, very kind, mate. So let's go. We'll go a bit of history first for yourself, and then no doubt we'll talk a lot about StoreLocal. Your background, lawyer. So what was the path? Was that a parental influence? Was it a go through school and knew you were going to go to that path? What got you down the lawyer path in the early days?
It's one of those labels you can't shake, right? Once you're a lawyer forever. Mm-hmm. Look, when I go back earlier than that, when I finished school, I had no idea, like most people, what I was really going to be doing. I was only 16 at the time, and I ended up at Gatton Agricultural College, which was the only place where you could do property studies. And right. That was after a couple of years break where I did some jackarooing, I did some odd jobs around Brisbane, and really just finding my way as a 16 and 17-year-old young lad. And did some property studies and had a great time out there at Gatton Ag College, which became University of Queensland, and was the only place, as I say, where you could do the property studies, and developed some outstanding friendships and played a lot of rugby, country rugby, and had a fantastic time. But it wasn't really fulfilling me, it wasn't challenging me terribly much. So I sort of reverted then to what I was originally going to do right through school, and that was to go into law. I did my 5-year articles in this very street where we sit now, right, in Alfred Street in Fortitude Valley, incidentally, and studied full-time at night and worked in a law firm during the day. And once I completed that, here in Brisbane, focusing on property, again, property planning and environment. Mm-hmm. I relocated to Melbourne with my now wife, Dimity, and we set up a life in Melbourne, and I worked for one of the largest firms, or the largest firm in Melbourne, and found myself going up and down the lift in 101 Collins Street in a suit and tie and the whole palaver, and was really at the top end of the legal profession with some incredibly smart young people, again in the property planning and environment department.
Right. So you're in that position, no doubt, like a career path, the trajectory looks incredible, everyone's pumped, this is amazing. There was a fundamental shift. I don't know. How long were you doing law for? How long were you working in that role?
I was there with Freehills in Melbourne for a couple of years, and I'll tell you what the shift was. I realised fairly quickly a couple of things. There were a lot better lawyers than I was. These are the cream of the crop coming out of University of Melbourne and from Adelaide and from Sydney, and they were going to be partners, and that was their destiny in life, and it most certainly wasn't mine, and I worked that out pretty quickly, which is really why I took that high-end job in Melbourne, to work out whether all the hard work that I'd done over the previous years was going to be worthwhile, and that was something that I wanted to do very long term. But then I had an epiphany, particularly one night I'll never forget. I was walking down the corridor about 11 o'clock at night, 11:30 at night, which was quite standard. And being a young Brisbane lad, and I was sort of mid-20s at the time, used to the sunshine and the beaches, I basically spent a couple of years barely seeing the sun, in at the office before the sun came up and getting home sometime after midnight. And that was just the way that law ran then. And as a young associate moving into senior associate role, you took that on and you were meant to love it, and that was the path that you had. And I remember walking down the hallway one night and seeing a partner, Frank, I forget his surname, but coming down the hallway toward me, and I just thought, he's sort of in his mid-50s, and is this what I'm really going to be doing? There's a better way to make a buck than charging for my time for the next 30 years.
Right.
And so I spoke with the partner in the section, and to my eternal credit, Freehills worked with me and transitioned me into a property role.
Right.
With a property advisory group in Melbourne, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in property, and that was a consistent theme throughout my study and my career to that point, and has remained ever since.
Right.
And I opened up an office in Melbourne for a Sydney-based property company. I knew no one in Melbourne, and I just worked the streets and built a company with a friend of mine, Simon Tobin, who joined the company at the same time.
Right.
And built that up to about 10 people over a couple of years. And it was a really interesting business, a really, really good group of people. We did property advisory work, property development work, project management work. And I got a lot of lessons out of that, and just how property really works in a hands-on capacity rather than documenting transactions as a lawyer does deep into the night, as I learned. And that was a really rewarding couple of years, and as I said, a great group of people and really good learning ground, and got to know a lot of people in Melbourne. And we'd had 4 years in Melbourne by that stage.
Right.
The sun was beckoning. We had our first child on the way. And I also just sensed that there was a change in the property industry, and that the financial side and the funds management side, which was just starting really then, was where the action would be. And to illustrate that, at the time, Macquarie Industrial Trust had $200 million worth of assets. Now, Macquarie Industrial became Goodman, and Goodman today has got over $100 billion worth of assets. So I'm talking here the mid to late 90s.
Right. And
it was really just beginning, and to be honest, I had no idea of the finance side of things. And I took a role with Westpac Structured Finance Group in the institutional bank in Sydney, and that really ticked two boxes for me. One was to move into the finance side of property to really round out my learning, and two was to get us to Sydney.
Right.
Which is where I was originally born, and some of my wife's really close friends were, and we could be in the sun and enjoy life again. We really just found Melbourne a wonderful city, but we're beach dwellers, and that's where we needed to be.
I feel like anyone from Queensland who has done a stint in Melbourne always says eventually had to come back up north. Maybe you settle in Sydney, but oftentimes it's a stint, not a lifetime.
Yeah, that's right. And look, and places like Brisbane now, we're going back sometime, I'm showing my age, but it was very different back then in Melbourne. There were great restaurants, great coffee, etc. As you know, Brisbane's got that in spades these days. So it's really evened out. Yes.
Well, I look at a post-COVID world. Half of Victoria moved up here anyway, it feels like.
That's right.
So, I don't know. Yeah, very interesting. Where did self-storage come in? Because I believe for you it was an investment initially. Is that correct?
Yeah, so look, just to follow that through, I go through every step of the journey, but I had a great privilege after a couple of years there at Westpac to meet the White family, Brian and Dan White.
Yep.
Brian was the chairman at the time, and Dan is now the chairman. And I joined Dan's the early stages of his investment business known as Ray White Invest, and shared an office with Dan in Sydney. And I've got to say, in terms of influence on my career, Brian and then Dan have been the biggest influences in my career. Just the way they run the family business, the way Brian clearly and simply makes decisions and sees things and his values and the way that he has stuck to growing that family business through thick and thin has been it was a heavily shaping experience for me. We relocated back to Brisbane stayed with that business, but we had our second child, and there were family reasons we needed to get back up to Bris, and we did that. And then while I was working with Dan, I bid for a site at Melbourne Airport, and I had no expectation of getting the site, and we're now in sort of 2006, and I won that tender, and it was 7,680 square metres. I remember it clearly on Sharps Road, 75 Sharps Road, Tullamarine, and just on the south side of Melbourne Airport, on Melbourne Airport land. And I'd come across that opportunity because I had JV'd a couple of projects at Brisbane Airport when I was with Dan, and the Airport Corporation up here, and they were really successful projects. And no one else was really looking at airport property at the time in the Australian property market, and I always see that as a bit of an indicator of maybe there's an opportunity. If everyone's going left, then sometimes a good opportunity to jig right.
Yes.
And bid for the site, got the site again for the reason not many people were terribly interested in it. Spoke with the head of property at Brisbane Airport, Rob McTaggart, who had done some self-storage on the site in his own right. And he said, why don't you try self-storage? I'll have a look at it with you.
So you bid for this with no plan of this, no idea of what you're going to do with it?
No.
Right.
That's just good real estate.
Yeah,
And good real estate, I fundamentally believe, if you buy good land appreciates in value, and even if you slightly overpay for good land, you will
someone wants it
over time. But also understood airport property well. And the site was a really good site. So we decided to have a go at self-storage.
Yeah, right.
And fundamentally, the first deal was a pre-lease to National Storage for 15 years. So it was really an industrial property deal at the end of the day, but the tenant happened to be a self-storage operator on a 15-year lease. But I watched that property really carefully, and I always look through property through the prism of risk and return, and there were 650 tenants there. There were 10 car parks, 1 staff member, and nothing was happening.
Right.
And I just could see that there was money being generated out of those multiple tenancies, and most importantly, at no point would they wake up and find that their income had disappeared overnight because it was so diversified across so many tenants on that site. So it was actually the first time in any transaction that I was hoping that the tenant wouldn't pay the rent and that I'd get the property back.
Yes.
So we were fortuitous there that National Storage then was leading into a listing to be the first ASX-listed self-storage company in Australia. And they did a couple of rounds of acquisitions of properties that they were the tenant of. So they came knocking and bought the property off us. It was a great transaction for us financially, particularly given that we completed the project in 2008 and we sold in 2011. They were tough times in property, and that was a really good transaction. So it was doubly good for us. In that time frame, Rob had left Brisbane Airport, and we decided to set up a business and move into self-storage, which we did. So we took the proceeds from that and then invested in an acquisition in Melbourne at Northcote, and proceeded then to start to acquire assets through the Australian self-storage sector. Again, characterised by the fact that not many people in the Australian property market were dialed into self-storage at the time.
Right.
So, people were focused on industrial and office and retail. Self-storage was really unknown, and I just felt that from a risk perspective, but also the fact that no one else was really looking at it, there was probably going to be some good buying for a few years until people realised what a positive risk assessment the sector offers.
Yeah. Was that the birth of the StoreLocal brand at that point?
No, for the first few years on that journey, Rob and I managed stores ourselves.
Yep.
And they just had geographically specific names.
Local branding,
Local branding. We really got to know storage intimately at our store at Tweed Heads, which we still own to this day. We acquired that site 3rd of December 2012. Our on-site manager departed on about the 19th of January in the middle of the night.
Right.
And so Rob and I took turns at sleeping at the facility and running it. And it was a facility, I should emphasise, had no computers. It was pencils, rubbers, rulers and paper.
Wow.
And we took turns sleeping in a swag in the self-storage centre in an industrial location in Tweed Head. So really got to know the sector deeply and intimately.
Yeah. I bet some of your lawyer colleagues from Melbourne would have looked at you going, what is he doing? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, some scary noises in an industrial estate.
I bet.
But look, we really getting to know the industry from the ground up. We also used a large operator called Storage King on some of our sites during that period of time, including the Northcote site that we bought in 2011 in Melbourne. Now, I guess the journey then changed. We had started raising capital from private investors, which is what I had been doing with Dan White over the years. So I'd got to know that sector quite well, and had investors that had started to follow me then for over 5 years, and were enjoying some good returns in self-storage. So I was visiting the site in Melbourne, Northcote, one day in 2014, and walked on site the staff member there, branded and managed as a Storage King, but we were the property owner.
Yes.
Staff member didn't stop me. I just walked through, which is not great security. The store was not swept. There were rodent traps upside down. There were exit lights hanging out of the ceiling. Financially, the store was performing fine. And we were getting our very basic one-page monthly reports, but turning up on site, it was clear that the site was not being looked after, that we didn't have the attention of the manager, Storage King. I immediately rang the CEO. I got a call back over the weekend or the following Monday from the area manager, and they basically told me, how dare I turn up on site unannounced.
To the property that you own.
To the property that we own.
Yeah, how dare you.
That they were making quite handsome fees from. That bugged me enough that, and combined with the fact that we had run some stores ourselves and we'd been in the industry for long enough, I thought, no, we're going to do something about this. That's not how I would respond to a customer. So I emphasise again, the financials were fine. Yeah. But it was just the way that we were treated as a customer really stuck with me, and I just didn't think that was the right thing. Yeah. Absolutely the dominant brand in Australia at the time with 150 stores. We had 5. Yeah. And the next biggest at the time was probably half of their size. So they were absolutely the biggest brand, and perhaps that influenced the way that they treated us as an owner. I don't know. So we got busy, and we actually poached what we thought was their best operator in their whole network, a fellow by the name of Mark Gregg, who I know you've come to know.
I know him very well. Yes.
And I'd gotten to know Mark at some of the Storage King conferences over the years, and he just stood out to me as someone with a passion and an energy for self-storage, which is a topic, is a bit of a barbecue killer, by the way.
I bet you've given it a crack, though.
I've given it a crack. It's funny, it gets in your blood and you get very passionate about it, but no one to this day has been as passionate as Mark Green.
Yes, agreed.
And you have to agree with
Oh, I do.
And Mark agreed to come and join us and start an all-new brand. And ever thankful to Mark for doing that. And he remains a co-owner of that business with us, and he's a pleasure to work with to this day. And his passion and his enthusiasm and ambition is not diminished in any way, shape or form 8 years later. So we were in our boardroom at Hendra, still our head office now, and we got out the butcher paper, and we got a marketing consultant in, and we came up with a name, StoreLocal. We had brand personality, and what happens if you invited your brand to dinner? Well, who would they be? All these sorts of branding tricks. And we started StoreLocal and applied that to that store at Northcote, replaced Storage King with StoreLocal, and applied it across our existing stores. And then we went into the industry and grew that brand over time. There's plenty of things we got wrong and plenty of things we've got right. And we now find ourselves 8 years later, 8.5 years later, as the 4th largest player in the Australian self-storage sector. And we really just feel like we're getting started, and we've got strong momentum.
I always love the I feel like we're just getting started notion. It's like it's a recurring theme from any of these sorts of conversations where it doesn't really matter how quickly you grow. It's like you always feel like you're right at the beginning, and I can see the next step and the next step, and we'll just keep going from there.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's cool.
Permanently dissatisfied.
I love that. And I also love the notion of loving storage, because it's like, I think you're right. It's like, I can see it being a barbecue killer. Not many people would ever consider self-storage as something you could be passionate about. But at its most simple, it's just it's something that enables people to free up their home, make their business more effective. I get it. It actually makes sense as it's an enabler, which is, it enables life, which is cool.
Absolutely. And there's amazing things that goes on in self-storage.
Yes.
We have artists in residence. They turn up every day, they paint, and they go home.
Yeah.
We have a clock collector in one of our stores in Melbourne. And at 3 o'clock, all his clocks go off. It scares the hell out of the rest of the customers.
Yes.
We had a haunted store. We've had illicit substances
I bet you have,
covered by the police in self-storage.
Yes.
And more sinister things have happened than that. So, look, there's always something going on in self-storage. And a few weeks ago, I'm a storer myself at a couple of our stores here at Hendra and up at Noosa, God's Country. And I was at Hendra the other weekend, and someone is running an eBay business from the store. sorts DVDs, books and various things and photographs and puts them on eBay, and he runs his entire business out of our self-storage facility. And just chatting with him for half an hour on a Saturday afternoon, just learning how relevant it is to him and his life and his business. Self-storage is, it's something you can get passionate about.
Yes, no, I see it. It feels to me like it's a business that, it's on the surface seems quite simple, right? It's like, it's a building, yeah, that all makes sense. You build a brand, you operate the facility, but then as you talk, it's like, okay, this is more complex. You've got this investment sort of fund component to this, and your personal investments and no doubt fundraising. I know that you manage facilities for other people. You're also effectively brand managers. Do you think about this approach to sort of layering multiple business models? Is there an approach there, or is it this is just what makes the most sense for us? This is the most efficient way we can grow this?
Sure. I guess we've had a strategy from day one, and that is to build a nationwide business so that, again, we're diversifying our risk geographically.
Right.
No one else apart from the bigger three brands had done that to that point, and that remains the case to now. So, but from a risk perspective, you have 600 tenants in a single location, and then if you have a nationwide network of locations, you really are heavily diversified in risk. We also realised early on the strength of brand and the importance of having a brand that would cut through. And one of the sort of founding views that we have, and we have deeply held to this day, is that with the advent of the iPhone, the world is flat, right? So a kid can grow up in Brisbane and grow up in Manhattan Island, and they're exposed to exactly the same influences of fashion, of music, or whatever it might be. Back when I was a young kid, for someone to pack up and go to the US, that was the end of the world.
Yes.
But our view has always been that, as the world gets flatter, people will ultimately come back to their local community, because that human need for connection and authenticity and that deep community feel is actually really what makes us tick as people. And of course, COVID accentuated that, and no one saw that coming, but it has really made people appreciate their local areas. So StoreLocal, the name says it all. It is local. So we do a lot of community connections, community partnerships, community activations, and the staff, myself included, are heavily involved in local community clubs wherever we may live. So, look, the risk diversification, the importance of being local and having a strong brand that was differentiated from the other big three brands, which are quite corporate, quite masculine, or very family-oriented.
They're also quite similar as well.
Quite similar, and we've spoken with you guys about that in the past. No one's really differentiating self-storage. And every product in any segment is often quite similar, but it can be differentiated through its brand,
right?
Messaging, but that brand's got to be authentic.
Yes. Great.
You can't wake up one day and change your brand. You go back to your opening comment about Outlaw. I guess we've seen ourselves as the late arriver to the nationwide players.
Yes.
We love being on the outside. We love coming up and challenging and jousting and trying different things. I know that drives Mark every day of the week. For us, that brand and that sense of being a little different to the rest is something that's driven us, and personally and professionally. And then in terms of layering our business model, we've always had, again, deliberately various avenues of growth. So always thinking an old lawyer here in Alfred Street taught me way back in the day to always have a few horses running in the race, because they don't always make it to the finish. So I guess I'm diversifying risk again, right? So we have an investment business. We raise capital from high net worth individuals and co-invest ourselves all the time, family offices, and most recently last year from a global private equity group based out of Switzerland. So we've got a deep capital base that supports our business. We also grow organically, as I mentioned, through the brand, so the day-to-day operations in the stores, organic growth. And then the third arm is what we call third-party management.
Yes.
So people that own stores will actually use our brand and apply it to their store. So we don't own the store, but they're using our brand. A bit like I say, if you're going to go and develop a hotel in the city, you might not call it Matt's Hotel, you might, but you also might try the Hilton or the Novotel or what have you. So people do use our brand, and so the strength of our brand and the uniqueness of our brand is what makes that cut through. So They're our really three core areas of growth. So investment and development of new stores, organic growth in day-to-day, sort of competing for customers in the stores in various locations across the country, and also what we call third-party management. So at different points of the economy, different parts of the cycle are moving at different points and different geographic locations all the time. At the moment, interest rates have shot through the roof, so investment is more difficult for everyone. And we're not immune to that. But our third-party growth is really strong because we've got developers coming into our sector now who are attracted to the diversified risk of self-storage now that office and retail and other property is more difficult and vertical residential is quite difficult. They're now turning to self-storage and they need a brand so that they can get debt funding, and they don't know how to run self-storage. So they're ringing us and using our brand. So our third-party management is growing quite strongly while the investment is slower at the moment. And that will turn at some point. And then the in-store growth has been moderating. It was extremely strong through COVID. One of the sectors that just benefited from people renovating and nesting, if you like. Self-storage performed extremely well. And then as interest rates have gone up, customers are deferring decisions, looking for discounts, etc. So growth is still there, absolutely. And this spring trading period has been absolutely a surprise to us on the positive, which is wonderful. But it certainly has been back to more normal trading conditions, if you like. So anyway, we always run those three horses, and that's a deliberate strategy of ours. We now find ourselves on the investment side. We've got $400 million worth of assets. We've got plenty of dry powder capital to turn that into over $600 million of assets without raising any further capital. Our third-party growth is tracking at sort of 5 to 10 stores on our pipeline looking forward now, right across the country. And the in-store growth, well, we're out duking it out with the bigger brands and everyone day to day.
And certainly batting at an average probably much higher than you should be given the size and the size difference, right? It's like clearly you've taken a very, very strong aggressive stance on the brand positioning and so on, which almost dovetails nicely into a question around innovation. I know that this is an important area for you guys. Even things like transparency of reporting is as an area of innovation that a consumer would never think of, but is really important. And I think back to, I spent a bit of time in the US, and when I think of self-storage, I saw it all the time, but often what I saw was, single level, long, like off the back of a strip mall, a bunch of garages. You drive any self-storage facility outside of in and around a major city in Australia, they're high rises. It's incredible what these facilities are now, and you've done exactly that and built. I've seen it firsthand. The facility at Hendra. How do you think about innovation, both on the sort of the corporate side, but also in a facility itself?
Yeah, sure. So innovation is super important across any industry, and we're constantly trying to innovate, as our competitors, I'm sure, are doing as well. But and we've had conversations about this in the past with you guys. Innovation's great, but it's not really what matters to us. It's really all about the customer. I know that sounds like a tried sort of thing to say, but we're absolutely focused on the customer. And so if we innovate, it's whether it's relevant to the customer. Otherwise, we're wasting our time. And the capital allocation we've made to that innovation is just something to make us feel good, which is pointless at the end of the day. But if we talk about innovation in self-storage, it's been a sector that's been slow to innovate for a couple of reasons. It's a really high margin industry, so the incentive to innovate isn't really there. And the first generation of owners were family owners who did better than what they anticipated, and things just potted along.
Why would you change it? It's working.
Exactly. And again, low incentive to innovate. Then, so the Generation 2 stores came along, and I like to say that National Storage and Kennards and Storage King started to professionalise the industry as they built out nationwide networks in the 90s and into the 2000s, and started to build what we called second generation product. So coming away from the garages that you talk about, or even worse than that was the first generation back in the 80s. The sector only started in Australia in the late 80s. The second generation product might have been 2 levels, such as the facility that we developed at Melbourne Airport, but it still fundamentally had a desktop computer and keys and padlocks, and that was it. No lifts typically, or if there was a lift, it took a hell of a long time to go from one level to another.
Yeah.
So the customer experience was okay.
Yeah.
They're certainly much more secure and a more pleasant place to be, but early days. When National Storage listed in late 2013, coming up to 10 years now, they started to institutionalise the industry, which is the third phase of the industry, if you like. And through that period of time when they listed, they were smaller than what we are now. They then aggressively acquired a whole bunch of smaller operators and started to drive through capital investment and innovation through the industry and did a great job.
Right.
And hats off to them. To the point now where they are absolutely the largest brand and have overtaken Storage King by some margin. So in that generation, that third generation of institutionalisation, we started to see 5 to 7 years ago a more impressive facility appear in our industry. Really early movers started to do 3, 4, 5, 6 levels on high-profile locations. But the question was, would customers pay for it? And come back to the customer experience. If it's a great experience, they will pay for it.
Yes.
And what our customer surveys keep telling us, and we keep forgetting from time to time, is they're focused on security. We know that self-storage is super secure, but customers aren't always aware of that. So if we can provide an environment where they're secure, they've got a pleasant experience, and it's actually not a bad place to go, they will pay for it. So we've been part of that journey. We built the Hendra facility here at the doorstep to Brisbane Airport and finished that in 2022. It was awarded Best Facility in Australia and New Zealand, which was a specific goal that we had in delivering that project. Yeah. And it's an awesome place to go. The customer feedback we get from that is off the charts. They actually just go there to hang out.
Yes.
So the third generation product, which others and we are delivering, including our Hendra store that I mentioned, they're multi-level, the air is treated, there's really nice signage throughout the facility. Yeah. There's co-working space. Our brand is Work Local. It was a really nice, well-fitted out boardroom with video conference facilities and coffee, etc., which gets heavily used. And featuring in the Hendra facility, one of the earliest movers in the Australian market with Bluetooth technology. So there's no keys or padlocks at the Hendra facility. It's all done on your phone. So you can now move in a couple of minutes on your phone, turn up to the facility with the code on your phone, go open up the lift which goes to your floor and then open up your unit using the Bluetooth technology on your phone and then lock it on the way out. So that's actually a great customer experience. And then another layer that you can achieve out of that with business users, of which about 20% of our customers are, is you can share that code, for example, to the FedEx lady or man that might be delivering product to your unit in the middle of the night.
That's cool.
And then you can share the code to your staff, your on-the-road sales team. And so you're actually starting to run your business from self-storage and take that again to another level. Self-storage is actually becoming part of the logistics chain.
Yes.
It's not last mile logistics, it's last half mile logistics because it's typically located right in amongst the rooftops.
Yeah.
So that's generation 4 self-storage yet to come, where it's a place to do business and it's part of the logistics chain of small to medium enterprises, but also increasingly global organisations are now using self-storage, and we've got some of them at Hendra as an example, using the self-storage networks as part of their logistics solution for their on-the-road sales teams. So that is where self-storage is going.
Yeah, it as you speak about it actually makes sense because suddenly I'm not mailing a physical key to someone to give them access or trying to leave it at a desk and hope there's someone there. It's like it's a pretty big game changer. I can imagine if I ran a trade business and had multiple people on the road, you wouldn't have a warehouse anymore. You could have multiple locations where stuff is stored. It actually does change the way that I think about trades, but actually anyone could operate a business. Very, very interesting. Moving on from sort of the structure of the business and talking about sort of marketing and growth and whatever, I know that you've done a lot in community. We talk a lot about everything from fundraising to supporting to partnering to giving access to facilities. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you do, but I know a big part of it is rugby. Obviously, I love personally, and you talked about it right back to university days. But I know that in the last couple of years, you actually tied it into almost a growth activity for the business as well through partnering in Queensland. Can you talk about that and how you've brought the two worlds together?
Yeah, sure. Rugby is a deep passion of mine and my family's. We're heavily involved in a local rugby club here in Brisbane, Brothers Rugby Club. My whole family has been, and they won the premiership again this year. I might just point out to anyone that's listening, we're probably the Collingwood of Brisbane rugby, so not a lot of people will be happy when I point that out.
Right. It was all going well until that. Yeah.
Exactly. So, now look, rugby is just the sport that I happen to have fallen in love with. Played it, been involved in the admin side of it, and I've seen the escalation in kids with disabilities playing rugby, female players of all ages, and it evolves also into touch rugby. And Brothers now has the largest all-girls touch program in the country, which we're the main sponsor of, as an example. So we've partnered with numerous rugby clubs, other sporting clubs. We do AFL, we do cricket right across the country. But to come back to rugby, it has been a real focus of ours. A couple of years ago, we joined the Hospital Cup, which is the main premier grade competition here in Brisbane, as the naming rights partner. So it's the StoreLocal Hospital Cup.
Yeah, cool.
Why? It's a community-based competition, but it's also an elite competition. So it is high performance, but it's very much rooted in the local community.
Yeah.
So the connections there are really obvious to us. Also, our target audience there, if you talk about the customer, it's not just people that might be wanting to use self-storage, but it is really relevant to the corporate community.
Yes.
So investment bankers, lawyers, commercial real estate agents, private investors, etc., are often pretty connected to rugby. So it's been a really interesting branding exercise for us to almost appear at the time larger than what we are.
Yes.
But that's part of the trick of branding.
It is, absolutely.
And we've grown with the Hospital Cup. And it's worth pointing out to the podcast audience that rugby in Australia is really, it's commonly thought of as not performing terribly well.
Right.
But if you look under the professional level at the community level of rugby, it is as strong as it has ever been.
Yes.
Player numbers are exploding. The quality of the game is fantastic. At the newly developed Ballymore this year, only a couple of months ago at the grand final, there were 7,000 people there.
Yeah.
The community went absolutely bananas, regardless of who won the game. It was just a fantastic game. The Rugby World Cup, which is finishing later this week, is again demonstrating that rugby as a global code is as strong as it's ever been. About one of the only places on the planet that rugby is not strong is at the professional level in Australia.
I was going to say, it's funny you say that. I feel like soccer or football, depending on, don't want to offend anyone, depending on where you're from, is very similar, right? At a state level, you know, you could go to the Suncorp Stadium and watch the Raw play and go, oh, there's not many people here. But there's very few sports that have the same participation levels at sort of kids, teenagers, as you go through the youth ranks. My experience with even just friends and family that play rugby is exactly the same as that. It's like, like at that top level in Australia, it might not be as popular as it once was, but in grassroots, I totally agree, never been bigger. So, certainly from a perception from the outside perspective.
Absolutely. And that's wonderful. And it's continuing to grow, and so it should. And then we're escalating into 2024. We're actually now partnering with the Reds, the professional team, and we took a view as a board in the last couple of months that, look, it's not a passion project at all, but for us it wasn't good form to walk away from the professional level of the code when it's not in great shape.
Get in support.
But to get in there and support it, our bit to help it.
That's cool.
It's a natural evolution for us from the community level of the game. And as we get bigger as an organisation and we become I guess more institutionalised as we already are, then it's probably time for us to elevate our brand as well. And so partnering with the Reds women's team and with the Reds men's team as they compete across New Zealand, Australia and the Pacific Islands, which are all markets we're presently in or targeting to be in, is a logical step and exciting.
That's cool. That's very exciting. Oh, it sounds like we're this far away from the StoreLocal Queensland Reds. No, that's cool. I love that.
I wish.
I love that. All right, let's move on. We'll get through to a bit of rapid fire here. So, the running joke here is that the rapid fire is never rapid because you ask a tight question and the answer could be huge. So don't feel any pressure to go rapid here. But we're talking about experiences. Best experience at work. Let's call it last year, last few years. What's the best experience you've had?
This last 12 months, a fantastic experience that Mark and I had was in Fiji. So we opened up a call centre in Fiji 12, 24 months ago. More than half of our stores, if you talk about innovation, are now unmanned.
Yeah.
And we have a 24/7 call centre in Fiji. So we went over and visited them in July 2023, and we had a great couple of days there. We had a village activation, and we ended up at lunchtime, Mark and I playing touch footy with these kids on this oval. It was just had hills and valleys all through it, and playing with the teachers. It was fantastic. So look, that's something, but also just to see the abject poverty, if to cut to it, that the local villagers do live in.
Yes.
But the smiles and the happiness and the singing and the basic way that they live. But again, it's local community and family, and that is what they are all about. So yeah, it was really moving for us, but it was fantastic. So we've got 12 people that work with us in Fiji.
Wow.
And can't wait to go and see them next year with the Queensland Reds when they play over there.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
I'd imagine that's, I mean, while I would imagine that wasn't a decision to go, this is almost a philanthropic play or this is our not-for-profit arm. It's like, really, I'm sure it was a business or growth opportunity discussion. But it's kind of nice to tick both boxes.
Yeah,
in some way.
Definitely. Yeah. Look, it's a business decision to run an offshore call centre. And based purely on customer feedback. Again, going back to the customer, it certainly improves the bottom line of our stores, but customers enjoy that interaction. The training that we give the people in the call centre there is first class, so that we know that the phone calls and the phone interaction that our customers are having with our brand is at the level that we want. There's almost no missed calls. And to cut to the chase, the conversion rate over there is about 10% higher than it is with in-store staff.
Wow.
Which is a long-standing bugbear of mine.
So it says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. So for a business decision then to move into, again, coming back to one of our core values of local community was really, really rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice. It's nice. Local doesn't mean here. Local is everywhere.
Absolutely.
It's cool. I like that.
Everyone's a local.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's take off the store local hat for a second. Best experience you've had as a customer. Could be of any product, any service. Think about just the experiences that you enjoy.
Look, there was plenty to talk about. There's no doubt about it, whether it's at a restaurant or what have you. Yeah, and you remember the service, right? Your price is forgotten, and the service is remembered. A friend of ours runs a store here in Brisbane called Calexico, and when she was opening up the men's branch of that nearly 10 years ago, shopped there, and just a few days later got a handwritten letter arrived through the post saying, thanks so much for coming by and supporting our dreams and what have you. And she's now become a friend of ours. And I've reminded her of that letter many times, and unsurprisingly, her business has become a roaring success. But it's the little things like that. And I took a lesson from that. I always have a piece of stationery with me, and I write notes all the time, and you'd be surprised the reactions you get from people by writing a handwritten note and sending it in the post, because no one ever gets anything that way. So it was a great customer experience, and she was thinking about the customer.
Isn't it funny how it's not about the discount they gave? It's not about they gave me 2 instead of 1. It's like, no, it's they showed they actually cared enough to put time and energy into something. And I agree with you about putting it in the mail.
Absolutely.
Like we don't get that otherwise. It's cool. It's really cool. Best experience you've created for a customer?
Look, probably the best way for me to answer that, if I go back to 2022 when Brisbane had yet another flood, the experience we've created for our customers there was at our Newmarket store, which was flooded.
Yes.
We were out of the flood zone, but it was an unusual flood in Brisbane in 2022 where stormwater pipes some way up the hills of Brisbane popped, and people well located up the hills got flooded. It was a really weird event. And only 10 years since our last one, our last 1 in a 100-year flood. And our store got flooded and then went away in less than an hour. Our unit, my personal goods, were on the ground floor, and we lost a whole bunch of goods. And included in that were handwritten notes from our kids from when they were babies, which cannot be replaced. Yeah. Photos which take days to dry out, and all sorts of things. And I'll never forget, our team dropped everything, our staff from head office, local community clubs, the guys from Brothers Rugby Club, local business owners, you name it, family members of our head office team, kids, my wife, everyone turned up at the facility, and we worked there for a week in the mud and the grime, and worked with customers to help them through what actually was a really traumatic event. Yeah. And so it was a great customer experience. We reopened that store within 3 months flat, and it filled almost overnight. And I'm quite sure that some of that was based on the local sort of word of mouth of what we had done, and we still get recognition from that to this day. But yeah, just to see my team there working day and night in gumboots, and their kids turning up to help. Yeah. When they didn't need to do anything at all.
And that's not a story. That's not the Newmarket team. That's head office coming out.
That's head office. Yeah. Some of the team had just joined, or they were part-time or casual, but they just saw the need to. And probably Brisbane did that generally.
Yes.
But, the other lesson we got out of that, it really reinvigorated us around self-storage. And go back to some earlier comments about what people store. People were in tears. It was a really emotional moment that we actually store people's memories. If they're business people, we're supporting their dreams. So we've got to take real care of all the goods that we store for people. The other thing we learned is no one ever throws out Lego. There is that much Lego in self-storage centres around Australia, you wouldn't believe it.
Really? I wouldn't have believed that. That's very interesting. I think deep down there's a big fun documentary on what people store in storage facilities. We've seen it ourselves through working with you guys over the years. Some of the most fascinating hobbies and interesting things people do, but Lego, I didn't think. That's interesting. How would you describe in a word or a sentence, or as succinctly as possible, your leadership style?
Well, I don't really think about it much, to be honest, because I think the best leadership is authentic leadership. So I just am who I am. For the good, for the bad. I'm sure there's things I can work on, and I constantly try and work on them. Whether I listen to podcasts, read books, I just a hoover for that sort of material, and probably make some of my team's eyes roll with it at the time. But I'm a great giver of books and podcasts. But look, if I was to describe my leadership style to answer the question, and again, I'll say it's not something I like to think a lot about, it really is, number one, is being authentic. Yeah. You can't fake leadership. Leadership also is about listening, 2 ears and 1 mouth, and use them in that ratio. So in meetings, I work deliberately to listen and say less than anyone else in the meeting wherever I possibly can, and pause and empower the young people in our business to make suggestions and find solutions. I guess the challenges are when you go from a founder business to a mature business is to, it's not handing over the reins, but it's just pulling yourself up to make sure that you're making space for other people to solve things and come up with ideas.
Tell me about it, Hans. That's a recurring challenge of mine as well.
Oh, yeah. It is. But the reward is seeing young people come up with far better ideas, which doesn't surprise me, but when it happens, I love it. Passionate and optimistic. I'm always driving the team to be passionate about what we do and optimistic. It's got to be fun, right? Like, no point turning up every day and worrying about the cents and the dollars. They'll look after themselves. But if you're passionate about it, you're authentic, you're optimistic, and fundamentally hardworking. You've got to outwork everyone else in the game in order to win. And never stop learning. I suppose they're the traits of my leadership, if I had to answer that.
I like it. That's good. All right. Most challenging work-related experience in the last few years? Was COVID challenging? I know obviously it turned into a big opportunity. Was that a big challenge for you guys?
Oh, look, initially it was for everyone, right? COVID was challenging, but it pretty quickly turned into a big upswing for self-storage, if I'm honest. Look, I think the biggest challenge, and it was a positive, has been the large capital raising that we did in 2022 with an offshore private equity group. Yeah. We raised 100 mil, and that's been a really big learning curve for our business, and it's been transformational for our business. So yeah, massive challenge, but we did it. We got it done, and we're really enjoying that relationship. So that's probably the biggest challenge over the last couple of years.
I can't imagine many people just casually like, oh no, that was easy, raising 100 mil. Like I can imagine that's a complex process.
Oh, it's a complex process, no doubt. But again, back to the prior question, it's being authentic and being optimistic and being passionate about what we do attracts customers and attracts capital.
Yeah, cool. All right, final question for you. What's an experience that's occurred in the last 12 months that you'll remember 10 years from now?
Probably three things I'd say. The RBA lifting interest rates from effectively 0 to 4% in a heartbeat.
We've all felt that.
We've all felt that, and that's transformed investing. It's transformed business, and maybe in a good way. Everyone's had to get their business fit and ready to go. It's certainly shaken anyone out of any COVID sort of hangover pretty fast. So it's done its job. The Fiji trip. Absolutely, I'll remember that 10 years from now. I toured Fiji as a rugby player 30 years ago, and I still remember that. So I'll certainly remember my next trip to Fiji. And I'll say it because it's work-related, because we sponsor the competition, but Brothers winning the premiership this year is pretty special.
It's nice having your name on the trophy as well.
Absolutely. I got to hand the trophy to the captain of Brothers.
Oh, that's very nice.
Tick the box on that one.
Very nice, very nice. All right, listen, I'm going to close it out there. Hans, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to do something that I've only done this once before for the podcast, but if you're... Needless to say, if you're looking for storage, there's nowhere else to go. So first of all, that's step one. But step two, long shot, bear with me, long shot. If you're sitting on a bit of commercial real estate and you're sitting there going, well, I've had long-term, manufacturing or something else, just consider storage as a possible investment structure for you.
Absolutely. It's an absolute winner, low risk, high return, which is what everyone's looking for.
That's what everyone's looking for. Hans, thank you. Appreciate it, mate.
Matt, thank you so much. Great opportunity and great to see you and the team at JMD going so well. Well done.
Pleasure. Thank you. Cheers, guys. See you later.